This is the Budget and Finance Committee. Today is March the 7th. We're here to, we have our order of business. My name is Dick Rhodes. I'm the chairman of the committee. And we'll begin, I'm going to call the meeting to order. We will begin by standing for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge if you can, please stand. If you can't. Thank you. I think one of the first things I'm going to do, and I've had feedback from some of our homeowners and people that are trying to listen on YouTube. So I talked to the committee that please make sure your mic is on and that you're talking into the microphone. The report I'm getting is they cannot hear what we're saying. So I do establish, we do have a quorum today. We have one excused absence with Director Redmond. I did talk with her earlier, and she has verbalized some of her feelings about the proposed budget. The first thing on our agenda is to get approval of the minutes from February the 21st. Do I have a recommendation for approval? Consensus for approval. So moved. All those in favor? Okay. Yeah, well, the minutes are approved. Our first item of new business is a presentation from one of our staff here. I'm going to ask Mr. Bosak to open with the opening comments and then introduce our speaker for us.
If you recall, when we were looking at policies, I had FI 13, and we went through all the analysis of going to our attorneys to make sure the language was not only legal, but fit the purpose that was intended. And it revolved around the collection policies. So in the course of my conversations with Riley and Deb Long, and even Bill and Pete and Cliff got involved in one meeting, it became very, very apparent that they are doing so much more than what the community recognizes and really doesn't get the credit. They run under the radar screen all the time, but do a tremendous job not only collecting money for the community, but avoiding cost unnecessarily. So if you recall at that presentation, I suggested that we bring Riley back and let him speak to the committee, just if nothing else, to inform you about all the things they do so that the word gets out in the community that this does exist. If you have issues, this is a place to go. So James is a workman. He's got a whole new organization over there, done a great job putting it together, and is very, very active, very professional. When people contact him, the feedback is always very positive in the way that they were treated. So you're a real plus for the community and deserve the opportunity to share what you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate those kind words. Today we're going to be looking at the APFs and how the REDS program plays into those collections. I'd like to start with just a little bit of history. It was in 2017 that we automated the late liens and fees into the TAG system, and that's proved very beneficial. We created the REDS program in 2020. We revised FI 13 in 2020 and 2023 to clean up some language there. We took a more aggressive stance on collections in 2020, and we've improved the communication and networking between membership, CC&Rs, and our title analyst in REDS, because that's been very, very important, and there's a lot of very good information that needs to be exchanged between those three. The REDS is the Real Estate Data Services. Essentially, it's Sun City West's property management system. It basically gives us daily notification on title transfers of the close to 18,000 homes we have in here in Sun City West. It recognizes non-traditional transfers of title, and this is where we pick up a lot of the APFs and REDS. It essentially could be like a quick claim deed, property that's inherited through a trust, for example, that is unconventional. It doesn't go through a title company. It also allows us to analyze those and see if it does, in fact, trigger an APF fee or possibly extra owner member dues if there's more people on the deed than just one. Benefits of RED, again, daily notification of property transfers. It ensures that our staff has the most updated property information available. It gives us advance notices and foreclosures in case we have to put a lien on a property for money that's owed to us. And it also, again, creates that revenue opportunity for APF fees and transfer fees. And it improves our collection process. And it also really helps our owner members in the fact that any retro fees that might be out there for 5 or so years, those aren't collecting as rapidly and doesn't leave the individual in a lurch, if you will, for lack of a better term, to owe a lot of money at one time. Since we started the program in 2020, the first year, which is a little longer than a fiscal year, but we collected a little over $500,000 that first year. Second year, over $600,000. And year to date, we're at $4,900 right now. Since our inception, we have a total of $1,380,000 that's been captured through the REDS program, and that's money that possibly could have gone unnoticed. It's kind of interesting. This breaks down the APFs that we've collected and the years in which they were captured. Even yet today, we're capturing APFs that should have been paid 5 years back. So it's a very good program, and it's been very beneficial for us. This is a very neat slide here. It shows the historic 2004 to current date of our actual APF transfers. And as you can see the dip during the 2007, 2008, 2009 era when we were going through the housing crisis due to subterm mortgages. And then you can see our 2 banner years of 21 and 22. Those were absolutely fantastic. And then you can kind of see where we average out there between 2012 and 2020. Just a couple of notable things. I kind of mentioned this before, but since 2012, we've pretty much been averaging a little over 1,100 APF transfers a year. Between 2008, 2009, the housing crisis, obviously, took us down to about 627. And then the COVID year, which I found surprising, we're still at 1,142 homes that sold. And then we're averaging between 2012 and present, we kind of average right around 1,248 homes a year. And projected this year, we're looking at 1,012 possibly. And Cliff's going to tell us a little bit of the impact of that on the APFs. That's all I have. Any questions?
I do have a question for you,
Certainly.
and I don't know if you can answer it, maybe Cliff does. The money that's collected that you collect through the REDS program, is that deposited into membership dues, or is there another account that goes into?
That goes directly into the APF.
Goes right, it's
Yes.
into the APF. And if it's for a prior year, then I guess it's all deposited in for that given year.
Yes, I believe it is. Cliff would have to correct me.
And then the final question.
When it's collected, it's recognized.
It is. Then the final question is, and I believe you had, let me pull that up. For 22, there were 60 APFs that you collected. Did that count towards the APFs that we budgeted for? Count against that?
I guess, on average, yes. So when we budgeted for 1,200, which was 400 less than the prior year, but it was included in the prior year numbers. But when we budgeted, I would say we discounted that.
Okay, so let me ask it a different way. And let's just pretend that our number was 1,200 that we collected last year. Did we really collect 1,140? But you added the additional 60 here to the actual collection?
Yes. So the number for 22 includes the APFs collected through REDS that were for prior years. But only half of those, I believe, pertain to prior years. The other half actually pertain to fiscal year 22.
Okay. Thank you. Director Brown.
Thank you. Do we have a feeling right now, based on we've been through now 8 months of our first fiscal or this fiscal year, how we're going to end up at the end of June? Because I know when the things in the works and, inquiries being made?
Right. It has been kind of a bleak year, I must admit.
I know.
We're seeing we're looking at about 80% right now is kind of what I'm thinking is
So
going
we
to
may not
occur.
even make 1,000.
I think we will. I think we'll get just a skosh over 1,000.
Okay.
Director Ganato?
Thank you, Dick. James, I have some questions. This program, is it a service that we sign on to?
It is, yes.
Like LexisNexis, that provides this information to us? Is that correct?
Yes.
And so I'm looking at the data that you have for fees collected from July of 2022 to the end of the fiscal year. You say there were 63 transactions. Of that number, can you guess or at least estimate how many would have been collected regardless of this program through the ordinary course of property transfers?
Probably very few.
Okay, so what kind of transfers are slipping under the radar?
It tends to be when trust became very popular, everybody started putting things in a trust 20 some odd years back, and those are coming to fruition as those people pass away. And what's happening is those homes get inherited through the trust to their children. And we may not even know or be aware of the death because of the fact that it still isn't a family trust. And when we become aware of those type of situations, be it through membership, they come in to get a card, for example, and then we have to do a little investigative work, then we realize that an APF does apply to these folks. And for example, if they left the home to, say, 4 children, and all 4 children want to be on that deed or want to be in that trust and utilize the home here, they all have to pay for a member ownership dues.
When someone inherits through the trust and they decide that they want to now take the home out of the name of the trust and put it in their own name, wouldn't that go through a title company and then you'd find out about it that way?
That's one way it can be triggered, but a lot of these folks are just holding on to the family trust and not actually putting any change on the deed itself.
Fair enough, thanks.
Any other questions?
You have actually done a remarkable job for us, and we appreciate this. I guess from a B&F committee, we appreciate the money that you bring in, but we also appreciate the efficiency of the program, and that there's a sense of comfort knowing that we do have a handle on this. And thank you very much for you and your staff. Thank
Great,
you.
and thank you for your time.
I should have asked, is there anyone in the audience that has a question for Riley? Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the proposed FY 23-24 budget draft review, the latest revision by our CFO, Cliff Swan.
Okay, thank you, Director Rhodes. Good morning, everyone. So before we get started, just want to reiterate, today, what's being presented are the changes. Some of them are just kind of fundamental reporting changes today, but the overall budget up until Friday itself, the budget itself has not changed in terms of the operating budget. There are some things on the capital side that have changed. But any of those changes after Friday will be reflected in the operating budget, will be reflected in the presentation to the governing board on Friday. So, and this will continue to evolve because we're updating our projection as we close out months. So I need to reiterate that as well. So, if our projection is over or underestimated, it will reflect in the percent increase or decrease over projected for the budget itself. So keep that in mind. All right, that being said, let's get started. So, first of all, we received some feedback in the last presentation of this meeting. So some of the responses will be reflected in this program. But I think a lot of today's tasks for this committee is to workshop, so to speak, the budget and Q&A, and hopefully we come out of this with a recommendation of an overall budget that we're going to present on Friday. So, one of the big changes that has happened is we went out to rebid, or not rebid, but to shore up the bids we had for some of our asphalt and paving. Actually, we went out on everything, and the only projects that came back with changes were those in the area of asphalt and paving, and then on the botchery courts because of the cost of concrete. So $211,000 increase in capital budget for these projects. The R.H. Johnson Lot 3 at $85,000, Beardsley Arts and Crafts at $105,000, Grandview Pro Shop at $7,000, and Trail Ridge Pro Shop at $14,000. So those were the increases in those paving projects that are on the docket for next year. And mentioned the $10,000 in the bocce courts. That was due to the cost of concrete and some little changes to the project itself, I believe, with the boarding that we're putting up, the backer boarding. And then an add to the R&R spend, capital spend of $80,000 for the common wall along R.H. Johnson. It needs to be repainted and stuccoed. And that is a project that we're going to add for next year, and that will then continue to show up on the reserve study as the lifing goes down. So we're adding that to the reserve study as well. So anytime we have a new add to the reserve study, regardless if it's new capital or if it's R&R, an R&R item that wasn't on there before, when we add it, we account for the project in the year we're spending the capital, and then we account for it down the road. Okay, so kind of a big change we're making in the reporting aspect of our financial statement and our budgeting is there was a lot of discussion, especially last year when we came out of fiscal year 22 so favorably in operations. There was this misconception out there that this was somehow profit. And, profit is, we're a nonprofit. So all of the money that comes out of the excess operating revenue after we pay for our expenses is a direct component of our reserve fund. And it was brought to our attention by some smart people, I'll say, and they said, well, why don't we just allocate some of our member dues to the reserve fund itself instead of keeping it in that operating revenue section? Why don't we earmark that to go into the reserve fund, because that's really what it does. And it kind of what it does is it decreases that income from operations or cash inflow after operations, and it decreases that and puts it down in the capital section and earmarks it for a reserve fund allocation, because that's really what it is at the end of the day. So, we took a look. So we've done some research. So some information on this is from 2019 to 2022, our average allocation from operating cash outflow has been $2.2 million a year. And if you're thinking, wow, we had some good years in the last couple of years, so that's probably driving that up. Well, 10 years before that, it was 2.3 million average, or 5 years before that, it was 2.3 million. So we've averaged 2.2 to 2.3 million per year, and our income from operations, or our inflow from operations, to help bolster that reserve fund to get it to where it's at today. And so that's just one highlight that I want to show that. So, and then, doing this, it provides a balanced budget. Susan talked about it at the last meeting. She said this is really a balanced budget. It really is when you take because the money that comes from there gets allocated right into the reserve fund. So you're paying for your operations. The leftover money goes into the reserve fund. So let's budget it that way then, So, and then the estimated reserve fund allocation, that we're going to apply to this year, this fiscal year 23. And based on this year, fiscal year 23 operations and next fiscal year budget is 8%. So what we're going to do, because we have to be conscious of the 606 revenue recognition, we're not going to take it off of the actual member due, because that member due goes into a deferred revenue and gets recognized every 12 months, once a month. Okay, so we're going to take it off the revenue that's recognized. This way, it's already been 606'd, and we've consulted with Gene at CLA, and we can do this. And we're going to take a percentage, 8%, it equates to about 8% off of the membership dues revenue, decreasing it in the operating section, moving it down to the capital section, and it'll be on a line item called Estimated Reserve Fund Allocation underneath the APF income. All right. So the percentage, it will be presented in the annual financial plan process. So this is going to be a change in policy for us. It doesn't change our reserve fund policy, because this is an estimated reserve fund allocation, and it's money that's already being directed into the reserve fund. All right. So we're going to change policy FI-15 to include this in our methodology and part of our annual financial plan. So, and this percentage isn't locked in. We want to be able to be nimble enough every year to take a look at what we're going to earmark and allocate into the reserve fund based on where we're at in the current year for the reserve fund and where we are projected to be at over the next 5 years. So that's going to be part of our financial planning, and it will be part of our financial planning this year. All right. And like I said, this helps us identify what the reserve fund needs, and it also gives us the flexibility to move the percentage up or down based on the FFB requirements for the fiscal year that we're budgeting, as well as down the road. Yeah, I only got a couple more slides, then we can talk about it. Okay, so then on the APFs, this committee asked me if 1,200 was a likely scenario for fiscal year 2024, coming off of a year where if we hit 80%, we'll only hit that'll only be a little over 1,000 APFs. So had Riley and I worked together, brought the team together, the finance team. We did some historical look at the APFs, and honestly, we don't have enough information, because we collect a lot of our APFs in February, March, April, and May. So we've got the big APF months are ahead of us. However, we did adjust those APFs down to 1,100. So the impact of that was a point on the FFB. It's at the original proposed rate, it's $440,000 decrease in the FFB funding, which essentially drops at a point, the FFB percent a point. So we figured that if we're going to make that up, based on what our APF fees are versus the market, we would need to increase that APF from $4,200 to $4,700, so a $500 increase. So we built that into the modeling and into this budget for this year. And we still feel comfortable modeling 1,200 after next year, because historically you saw the trends. Historically, that's what we do. And since 2012, 1142 was our lowest year, which was the COVID year. So that's the numbers on what I just discussed. And then the modeling impact to that, you can see. I will say there's a correction to the modeling. I had adjusted the expenses for the fiscal year budget, and in the modeling, the expenses were still based on the modeling of 24 previously. So when I built that in going forward, that's the impact to, this used to be the operating cash inflow here, okay, but now it's the reserve fund allocation, okay? So going from 49% down to 46% by fiscal year end of fiscal year 28, and 44% by fiscal year 27. So had some discussions internally, also feedback from this committee, and there's some deep concerns about our FFB and our reserve fund balance. So I wanted to present some scenarios here that could bolster our FFB, and here they are. So currently we're proposing a 4% dues increase, taking us to $530, a $21 increase. For every percent that we increase, it's roughly $5. So if we proposed a 5% increase, it would increase the dues from $530 proposed to $535. Okay, so 1% equates to an additional $5. So if we proposed a 5% increase, going from $509 to $535, here the impact of that would be as such. So at the top row, you'll see the dues adjustment. In the short term, a dues increase of $5 will generate $60,000 in the current year. However, as that continues to increase at 3% a year, and you get a full year impact of that dues increase, it's roughly 140 to 142,000 a year for the year 25, and by year 28 it'll be 157,000. So that will take the FFB percent up to 47.5% in the modeling. That's an additional $5 in fiscal year 24 if we decided to do that, and that was decided to get recommended to our governing board. There's been a lot of discussion about credit card fees. So, and I think today you all are going to decide how we budget that. So if we took, and I just took one division of credit card fees and membership, and decided that membership could pay via check, or if they were going to use a credit card, they would pay a fee for that, a processing fee, to offset the credit card fee. So if we did that, that would have a $300,000 impact and a decrease in or an increase, in our reserve fund allocation. And then that would be compounded by 4% a year, because I have that built in to our revenue modeling. So the impact of that would bring the FFB up from 46.4 in 28 to 49.2. If we decided that we were going to, if you decided that to recommend a budget that has both of those items in it, and to bolster the reserve fund, the impact of that by fiscal year 28 would be, it would take the FFB percent up to 50%. So from today, from you, do we keep the existing budget recommendations from operations with any other adjustments that you may want? Or, with the 5% membership dues increase, that would increase the FFB percent by 1.1% by 2028. And then if we decided to do something on the credit card fees as cost avoidance, and use those monies to bolster the FFB, the reserve fund, that would increase the FFB percent by 2.8%, adding $1.6 million to the reserve fund by fiscal year 28. And if you decided both, you would get that $1.6 million as well as the $665,000 from that $5 dues increase in fiscal year for budget fiscal year, that would increase almost 4% at 3.9% to the reserve fund. All right. Questions? I know there's a lot of data in there.
Yeah, let me just open up to tell you that we'll have questions from the committee, but I wanted to tell you how much we appreciate all the effort and the work you've done. This is the second time that this committee's seen the budget, but I want to commend you for taking note to the discussion that we had 2 weeks ago when we first saw it, and it's obvious that you picked up many of the different items that we were concerned about. So at that, I'm going to open the floor for questions from our committee. We'll start with Mr. Bosak, if you have any, sir.
Cliff, is the estimated reserve fund 8%, is that, once you establish it, it's fixed for the year? Or can you
Yes.
jury rig it during the year if you need to, one way or the other?
That's a good question. We'll establish it, and then what will happen is basically there are months, the first 6 months we operate in the red, so those will get a little redder in those months, and then there'll be a little less green in the black operating months, or a little less black.
Yeah, I think the work that you've done on the dues increase in the APF, for the audience that's watching, they may not understand the importance of that bottom line. By bylaw, we're required to maintain 40%, and so this committee has done had many conversations with you and others to try to achieve that. I mean, we have to do that because the alternative of going below that is not good for the community. So I think that what you've done is very palatable for me. If you take it to the most base level, you go from $1.75 a month to $2.16 a month for the membership increase. The APF fee, I was $4,500, $4,700 is even better. So that's something that the community's not going to see, and it's never going to stop from selling a house. So I'm fine with what you've got.
Okay. Yeah, and just one comment to that is, Susan last committee, and she brought up a good question, and that is, what are the contingencies? Okay. On the expense, we can make business decisions about expenses, decide to maybe not cut greens or not overseed. If we get in an area where it's bleak and we're not seeing the return, the revenue. But in terms of contingencies, that FFB %, that's our contingency. And if we're at 40%, we have none. We have no contingency.
Just last comment, something will suffer. Either
Yes.
we have an assessment or capital projects get deferred or canceled, and we start a downward spiral into a community that we're not very proud of.
Yeah.
Let me just mention one other thing. We are keenly aware that we are dealing with our homeowners' money. That even what the committee would see on a budget of, let's just say $25,000 is huge. It's a lot of money. We know that, and we have prepared for this meeting. We've lived through budget and finance committee meetings every 2 weeks since September. We have heard presentations from our healthcare company that we're going to get a 34% increase in premiums. We could go on and on. Our professional advisement firm has briefed us twice on our investments, and we painfully know, we are aware of the ebb and the flow in the equity and the bond market. So we know where we are with that. What we're dealing with now is making the best with what we've got. You touched on the percent of our FFB, and I want to emphasize, and I know that the committee members understand this, but I want all of our homeowners to understand this as well, is that percent of FFB is critical. absolutely critical. You know, and we've set our range between 40 and 70. We're approaching 40 soon. And just some rough numbers that if we reduce the dues, you know, we'll be below 40 in a couple years, and that's critical. That's a critical thing. So at that, I just wanted to offer that, I think, as some preliminary comments. And these are tough times for us, and we know that we have to make intelligent decisions, and they have to be in the best interest of our community. Mr. Bosak, do you have any other comments?
You don't have February built into these projections yet, do you?
No.
For the estimate. So the last one they showed us for January, our revenues are up 1.2% and our expenses are up 10.3%. So
Yeah.
we got to take some action.
Mr. Miller?
Cliff, I think you did a great job. I look at the asset preservation fee and going into the reserve fund. And I think of the reserve fund as a battleship that turns very slowly. So Dick's comment about approaching 40%, I mean, it is hard to correct that when it starts going in the wrong direction in a quick fashion. So you have to be proactive and do what we're talking about doing today to position ourselves in the community for the future. Just a couple of things. You know, Christine brought up a very interesting point at the last meeting about the use of electronic checks, like we can use to pay our property taxes, and there's no fee associated with those. And that may be a costly system for us to implement in the future, but I think that's something that we really do want to look at as an alternative to credit cards and to checks. I don't know if you've had any thoughts about that or started to look at that yet.
We have.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the capability. We're doing some research on the payment gateway for that right now and what the fees associated with that would be. They are significantly, from what I understand, lower than the credit card fees. So we are investigating that.
Okay. And another question, I never use a debit card, but could people use a debit card? And are the fees for a debit card the same as a credit card? Okay.
Yeah, I'm nodding up to everyone. Ooh, I'm sorry. I'm nodding up to everybody, David, because my background in financial services, they are equivalent. They might be a slight difference, but it's still a transaction fee. The e-checks are significantly less.
Okay. So I think I have no issue with the rate increases or the APF. I have some vague recollection that someone had presented sometime during the course of this committee's work year what the asset preservation fees were here compared to the other communities. And I want to say even going to 4,700, we're still lower than what the other communities are charging or on par with that.
So yeah, there is a slight correction on the other communities. So Grand is at 5,000 and Sun City is actually at 4,000.
Okay.
So we would be in the middle, which that's generally where we're at.
Okay.
Anyway.
And so one last thing, do you want to bring up the topic of what we talked about since it impacts so many people in the community relative to the prices for beer?
Oh, yes. Yes, we had some eyeball on that, and that was I had miscommunicated that in my presentation. Beer is not going, the beer is going up essentially for pitchers, it's going up $1. So it just depends on which type of pitcher you buy. And then for cans, it's essentially going up 50 cents for each type of can you buy. So definitely want to make sure we're on the record with that.
Thanks. Yeah, after I got accosted on the golf course yesterday, I want to make sure that that gets communicated. So, all right, thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for bringing that up.
Director Brown?
Thank you very much, Cliff. I empathize with what you're going through with these budget iterations and the questioning or the confrontation you're getting about them. Just a couple of things. I've got more for later after you do the full budget presentation, but on what you've done so far. On the credit card charges, you mentioned that all this will come from charges to membership. I'm wondering if there's not a way you could do a hybrid, charge a little less for residents, but for guests, especially on golf. I don't know what the fees are with golf, but charge the full amount for golf. I know when we eat in restaurants anymore, sometimes you're charged a fee. I don't like it when I don't know it in advance, but if I know in advance, then it's my choice whether I'm going to pay cash or use a credit card. Mimos, for instance, charges to use a credit card. So my husband gets his breakfast every morning with cash. But I'm thinking that if we can do some of this, put it on our guests, I think our golf rates are very competitive. Is there a way we could kind of reach some kind of compromise in there? But I also think it's going to be very important, whatever we do, if we start charging for these, to make sure we're communicating this in advance to our members and our guests too. And I thoroughly agree with what Christine and David have said about e-checks. I know I pay my Maricopa County taxes that way, and also my property taxes in Missouri, and that's definitely an excellent way to do that. So I think we should probably, I think those are worth investigating.
Yeah.
So I have some more things, but I'll come back to them after you do the rest of your presentation. I'm just going to focus in on what you've done so far.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is as far as presenting in the budget. I've only presented the updates and changes. I'm not I am presenting on Friday. The
Okay,
full
well
presentation.
then,
So if you want to get
then-
into those other things, we can
well, I'll just go right ahead.
Okay.
This is something that I would like to have for Friday's meeting when you meet with the governing board. So
Okay.
this is just kind of a homework.
Okay.
Please, if we could, if it's not too much,
You got
I'd like to know some information about the FTEs. The budgeted FTEs that are shown are 294. And that's equating to 287 from last year, but I don't know if that is budget or actual. So I want to compare apples to apples. And I
Okay.
know when you budget for all the hours that need to be worked. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Whether you've got the person or not.
That's right.
And am I correct in that an FTE is 2,080 hours of work?
Yes.
Okay. So that appears to me that we're going up 7, but we have just contracted for janitorial services.
Yes.
And that's going to bring down that number. I'm assuming that will be showing up in future in the budgets with those changes.
Okay. So the 2.5 that I originally put in the presentation, which was the offset to the expense for the subcontract cleaning services, that is reflected in this number. Okay. However, it's actually 3.5 because we added the numbers that I had originally didn't include 2 facility cleanings at the time I did the budget presentation. So it's actually down 1 more. So it's 293 is the total now, not 294. And I'll present that on Friday. Yes, we budget for, so at 287, that's a projected number for this year.
Okay,
right.
what did we budget for? Do you know what we budgeted for the current year?
291.
291, okay.
Yes. So for this fiscal year, we budgeted 291. We're tracking at 287 right now.
Okay. I don't care what we're tracking at. I
Okay.
care about budget because that way we
Yes.
can compare apples to apples.
Budget to budget, yes.
Okay. So we're going up 2.
Yes,
Okay. We know one of them is in a position in accounting.
correct.
Do we know what the other position is?
It's in golf maintenance. What we did, it's actually a plus and minus. So we reduced some in rec, and it was in the area of landscape maintenance mostly, and we increased in golf maintenance. Golf maintenance is we've had trouble filling seats. We've had some success recently, and we filled those seats. And in the budgeting process for the seats for golf maintenance and meeting with Todd, we sharpened the pencil and looked at that again, and an overall increase in golf maintenance simply because we just need it. At the end of the day, we need it.
Okay, I'm kind of throwing all this around in my feeble brain this morning, but last year we budgeted 292, correct?
291.
291, okay. And that included the 3.5 FTEs that we've lost to janitorial, to the contract.
Yes.
Okay. So if I take that away, instead of 291, we had 287.5. If we got rid of those people, because those people aren't in the current budget, the next year's budget.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're going from 287.5 to 293. And that, to me, that's 5.5, right?
Right.
Okay, we know one of them. One of them's in accounting.
Yes.
Still leaves 4.5.
Yes. So there's plus. Oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Well, my question is, what additional work is going to be done that's not being done now that we need these other 4.5 people?
Okay. So we reduced. If you look at the budget from last year, okay. In recreation last year, we budgeted 93. I'm sorry, wrong number. Yes, the budget for last, sorry. Or no, I'm sorry. Correction. For the budget of last year, we budgeted 97 in recreation.
Okay.
Okay? A lot of things have changed in the recreation world operationally this year for us, including some restructuring at top management, as well as operating in the current year with a different amount of staff. Let's just put it that way. Seats that we haven't filled, correction, and things that we've budgeted for on the janitorial side for this year. All right, so in this fiscal year budget, 23, we budgeted 97. In fiscal year 24, we're budgeting 93 for rec.
Okay, so that took away 4.
That took away 4. In administration, we have the 1 ad. Okay? In golf maintenance, we budgeted 80 in last year's budget. In this year's budget, there's 86. We budgeted 80 last year because we simply just could not fill the seats. It wasn't that we didn't need the people. It wasn't that we didn't we didn't need the people. But so we filled some of those seats, and this year there's an ad there. So there's a reduction in landscape workers in rec and an increase in golf maintenance workers.
Okay, I did not know that I thought we always budgeted for what we needed, not what we thought we would have. And that's
Yes.
news to me that I didn't pick up last year, apparently.
Yeah. So I would say that golf maintenance has decreased from, in 2015, we had 104 FTEs in golf maintenance. In 2018, we had 98. And it has dropped every year since 2018. So as far as budgeting last year, we budgeted 80. I would say if we could do that again, would we do that? Probably not. But that's what we did last year.
You know, if I'm a visual learner, I'm not very good at audio.
Uh-huh.
If you wouldn't mind kind of putting this on a slide
Sure.
for Friday, and I don't think I'm probably going to be the only director at the governing board meeting who needs to see it in
Yeah.
more first grade terms,
Yeah.
so to speak.
You can see it currently. You can see most of it. I mean, we got projected 23. We don't have budgeted last year, but on the budget packet, you could see the trends in all those areas and
Okay.
the seats that have been budgeted. It doesn't include budget 23. It does include projected 23.
Yeah, that's
But-
what I want,
yeah,
though, is I want
But I
budgeted.
can put budget in there and it'll show that as well.
Okay,
Yep.
that's what I was missing, was budgeted.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was probably a long walk in the woods to get to a short answer, but
Well, hey, I mean, you're asking the questions, so.
my other question is there anything in this budget that supports our master plan? And if so, what is it? And if not, why not? Because we've spent a lot of time on the master plan.
Can you go into the presentation? So we do have some consulting services budgeted
Okay,
in the outside services line item. And then we do have capital budget for new capital in the PowerPoint. Yeah, just pull up one of the modeling slides. So if you look at you see R&R capital spend, and below that you see new capital spend. So 979 in the current year, 603 budgeted for next year, 1,854,000, 1,009,000, 1,009,000, and 2 million. So yes, it's not earmarked specifically because we don't have an exact, here's what we're going to do, we're going to start this date and all that. So I would say that there's 7 million in new capital, 7.7 million in new capital budgeted, modeled for fiscal year 25 and forward.
okay. I appreciate what y'all are doing, but I think that our residents need to know that that is in there, because with any dues increase, I think we need to see that part of that is going to apply to things that our residents ask for in the master plan. We've got the best community anybody could ever have, and I want to keep it that way. But with the master plan, I think there are still expectations, and I've been asked by some people, what are you going to do next year? Is anything going in? You know, those kind of
Yeah.
questions. So I think that needs to be brought out, that there is foresight being given to that and why that's part of the requests.
Okay, and we do have a master plan update coming.
Okay,
I'm not sure which date it's being presented, but we will present that. But that's a good point that we have funds in here now. If we decide that we're going to tackle one or two items, there's funds in there. But if we're going to tackle 3 or 4, I would say that's going to take some additional funding, which we'll have to plan for accordingly.
right, but I just think our residents need to know that there is something going on with that,
Okay.
because that helps kind of substantiate why we are doing things like dues increases.
Okay.
Thank you very much. You've done a great
Oh, you're welcome.
presentation. I appreciate it, Cliff.
Director Hobald?
Thank you. Well done, Cliff. First, I'll give a few comments. The visibility of the FFB contributions from dues of 8% is a great step forward. It took me about a year on this committee to get my head around all that funding. And it was kind of nice. It drops to the bottom line, and the operating budget can always work out perfectly, and the residual drops down. But that's residual that we are counting on. And this recognizes that very nicely. And I think a lot of people in the community will benefit from being able to see that we are not funding capital with only the APF fees. So well done. The sensitivity analysis that you put in your presentation, as well as the 20-year history of APF transactions, answered almost all of my questions. You're giving us the data, and so we can make more fact-based decisions. Again, bravo. My expectation now is that the operating budget is going to show possibilities of losses as well as gains, and I think that's going to be a healthy step forward for people to see how much money it actually takes to run the community. So bravo on all that. They're all steps forward. I still have a concern with the assumption of 1,100 APF transactions in a year. And that could result in a major blow if we don't achieve what I consider a very aggressive number. If you look back to the history book, Lehman's, I believe, crashed in October or November of 2008. And if you look at the long tail of real estate transactions that fell in 2009, 10, and 11, we could be looking at far more of a historical dip here to regress to an average. So I just want to throw out to everybody on the committee, everybody in the governing board, and everybody in the community that might be listening to this, that is a storm cloud waiting to drop heavy, heavy monsoon rains on us if that assumption doesn't come to fruition. I'm very, very concerned about that.
Director Vignato?
Thank you, Dick. I certainly second what John just said about the APFs. I think that the assumption that we will have 1,100 collected next year is probably overstating it by at least a couple of hundred. I drive around the community a lot, and I'm seeing more and more for sale signs as more and more open house signs, which indicates to me that homes are simply not selling. My wife is an escrow officer with a local title company, and many days she has absolutely nothing to do. So the home sales are out there, but they're not nearly at the rate that they were before. And I don't think that 1,100 is realistic. I think it's just too high. So I second what John said about the APFs. As far as the rest of the request here, I will say that it's tough and lonely being the contrarian on the panel, but I do question why you're choosing to only eliminate the credit card fees for the membership department and not golf, which actually comprises the bulk of the fees. So why did you stop? Why did you not include golf as well?
So golf makes up roughly 220,000 in fiscal year 22. Membership made up 280,000. You can increase those about 5% for this year and another 5% for next year. So membership is the largest portion. It's just the recommendation is going to come from this committee. I just wanted to show the impact of one of those areas. I have an opinion about that. If you'd like to know what that is, I'll tell you. Okay, so I think membership is it's an isolated. It's an isolated area where we could do this. We're not competing with anyone by doing this, so someone can't say, well, I'm just going to go pay dues over at Grand now, for example. That's one reason. Another reason is that there's other options. E-check, which we're working on. They can simply just open up their briefcase and write a check and not have to pay it. So it's a good opportunity that has the least amount of impact on our community, where they have options. They don't have to pay with credit card. If they like the convenience of it, they pay for the convenience of it. In golf and these other areas, not quite as simple. We wouldn't want to take checks at the golf area. Nobody walks around with cash anymore, really. It would take a lot longer to process a line of people if we were collecting checks and cash there. So you're kind of, I don't want to say forced to use credit card, but and then we can increase our golf rates to cover that. And then there was a comment earlier from Ms. Brown about the public. So of that 220,000, we roughly 20% of our play is outside play. So you could probably take 20% of that, just as a quick number. So it's about 44,000 in terms of credit card fees attributable to outside play. So that's my opinion on it. But this committee will discuss, and you all will come up with a recommendation if we're going to do anything with credit card fees. But the bulk do come from membership.
Okay, so my opinion, of course, for what it's worth, is that we just eliminate this fee completely from the entire community. People will get used to the new system. The generation of people I notice, and I'm quickly getting into that generation as well, but I see them walking around with wads of cash in their pockets all the time. There are some people who don't carry very much, but paying, and having been behind the register in a golf shop for a year and a half, taking cash or taking credit cards, it doesn't really change. We're talking seconds per transaction. Taking cash might just take a little bit more, but it certainly isn't going to change a whole lot. As far as that goes, I think that we need to do away with that. And just, if people come in and want to pay with a credit card, then you charge them the fee. If they want to pay with cash or they want to pay with member credit, they don't have to pay the fee, and everyone will get used to the new system pretty quickly. Continuing on the credit card fees, I'm actually astonished that looking at the proposed budget, you've eliminated $300,000 worth of fees, but not one dime of that is going to be given back to the residents in the form of less upward pressure on a dues increase. And in fact, your recommendation now is that we increase the dues for the new year. Instead of the $21 increase, now we're looking at a $26 increase. And yet, we've just managed to wallop $300,000 just like that off the expense side of the equation. I think that believing that the rec center is owed this money somehow, or that you deserve this money, doesn't show much respect for the residents. It's not your money, it's our money. And there should be less of an increase in dues if you're going to decrease the cost for credit card fees. Thank you.
It is the residents' money in the reserve fund. It's not the rec centers. It's the residents. So that money does belong to the residents in the form of the reserve fund.
And I'm not saying that you have to give all the money back to the residents, but I think that you should give everybody at least, look, we decreased the credit card fees. You're not going to have to pay them anymore unless you choose to. And so instead of increasing your dues this year by $26, we're only going to increase them by 19 or 18. Give something back to the residents. Show them that you're working for them. I think by charging people that credit card fee, if they do want to do a transaction, then the people who cost the community money are the ones who are paying that money.
Director Novello?
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes, and thanks again, Cliff, for being so transparent. So first of all, I'm just going to piggyback on some of the things that Mr. Bagnato just said a little bit. That I personally, I love all the different levers that we have at our disposal. It's my understanding, and please, Chairman Rhodes, correct me if I'm wrong, this committee makes the recommendation on which pieces of this. This is not Cliff's recommendation. He's presenting some levers that we can now discuss and pull, correct? Thank you, sir.
Yes, we have options.
We have plenty of options, so thanks for clarifying that for everybody. The other thing that I just wanted to say, when we're looking at some of these levers, I do have to actually, I agree with one of the things that you had said, Mr. Bagnato, about the credit card fees. If we're going to increase them in one area, I think we could be universal. It's one of the levers that we have. We don't have to do it in just one area in membership. We could say it applies across the board everywhere where we accept a credit card. That's up to us. I would be in agreement to considering that personally, discussing it with the rest of you. I think with education and signage, if I know about that fee, yep, I'm going to grumble when I see it. I see it in restaurants. I see it everywhere now. But as a resident, as an owner member, I have options that you just outlined, right? If I don't want to pay that, I don't have to walk around with a wad of cash. I'm notorious. I have no cash in my wallet. I don't know about the rest of you. I guess I'm in that generation. But in any event, I have options, though, as an owner. I could put more money in my account and then just use that. And again, no fee. So back to my questions, though. Let's see. I love the transparency component, right? A lot of my colleagues have already asked a lot of the questions I would have asked, so I'll spare some of that when we have the discussion on some of the specifics. I do have some specific questions on some of the line items in capital, but we don't have to go into that now. We can talk about that, I believe, amongst us. Transparency, Cliff, just a suggestion for your consideration. I love, when you started talking about creating the separate line item, the way that we're going to show this funding, actually fund it, for me as an owner, that just provides so much more clarity and transparency. I really want us to continue to have, when we receive these updates from you every month as a community, not just the committee, but the community receives these updates. If we can include the what's going on in 3 areas, I hear from residents all the time. What's happening? What's the change in our investments? I know that we get the reports, but when you're presenting them in open session, it would be great to have that. Just the key changes in what's going on in our investments, what's happening to that allocation percentage, how are we doing on that? And the last thing, as Director Brown was pointing out, the master plan. If there's a way to actually pull some of this out now and start showing us and all of the owners in the community how much of what we're paying in our dues is funding some of these things that are investments for the future. I'd really like to see that. Do you think that would be possible? I know that it's been a little nebulous.
Yeah, so
It's more of an improvement for the future. It's nothing I would expect
Right.
for you to do today.
Right. So, that's a great point. And I think when we're talking about the fully funded balance and that percentage, like you said, and we're looking at the impact and what we need, because that's really what it's all about. You've got the R&R study, which is the stuff that what do you call planning for the inevitable, the things that you know that you're going to need to fix. The other component of that capital spend is new capital spend, and to be able to know what you're earmarking for new capital spend down the road. And as we dial that master plan in, we'll have specific budgeted items, but it is a little nebulous right now, but we are working towards that, and that is definitely a component that would need to be identified and called out as we report, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's something that residents have come up to me about. I'm presuming the rest of you get that all the time too. Let's see here. And just again to make sure before we go into our discussion piece, you had mentioned that the when you were suggesting in this last page the additional $5 increase to our dues to $535 instead of $530, that you're making that recommendation to us to consider, but it looks like all of the modeling was built on $530. Am I correct?
Correct. So the
Okay.
modeling initially is built on $530, and then
Good.
you'll see a line item at the top that
How we
says
can, yeah.
yes, and that's just to show, because the concern that I from this committee and from others is that, man, our reserve fund is,
Yes.
we need to look at that. So what are some options to bolster that? And that's to David's point, it's a slow moving ship. It doesn't happen
Right.
overnight, but if you don't plan for it, you wake up and all of a sudden your credit card fees are $500,000.
We can,
You're
and
like,
we can
"Oh,
see that in the 5-year projections, fiscal year projections that you've done.
Yep.
That we'll be paying for some of those for a while. We see a bit of a decline, or it's holding. So thanks for that. But I want to make sure I heard that. Let's see. All of these things are really up to us now, I think, in terms of what we can do for the. So it was 1% change for that $5, but the projections are all based off of the original projections, right?
That's right.
And the projections that you showed, did they include any of the offsets for credit card and so forth?
No. So
Okay.
there's a base modeling, which is this one right here, the first one.
Right, the
And
very
then
first one.
and then
That's
the
the
other
do not,
ones
if you
are
will,
the modeling
base,
with
not
the
do not.
impacts. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we've reached a point now that we have had the opportunity. This is only the beginning. Now we have to have some discussions within the committee here. I'd actually like to open that up. Now, Cliff, we'd actually like to have you stand by.
Okay, yeah.
Because I believe that there will be some more questions here.
Sure.
But I really want our committee to begin the dialogue. Just as a point of information, we need to get a recommendation to the governing board today. Now, remember, this is an iteration of the budget. I assure you, this budget will be changed and tweaked and whatever multiple times. So what we will be doing is giving the governing board what our initial reaction is to this, and be prepared, because I'm sure it's going to change, and it will meet the scrutiny and the cross-examination of many other people here. So let me begin the discussion. And what I would say is I want to echo Christine and Frank's comments about the credit card charges. You know, we have had this discussion, Cliff, on the $300,000 in member dues, and I think that's a great idea. I want to pursue, I would like to look, I'd like to introduce that we use all of our credit card charges. Now, I know there's issues with that, and you know, I think that those are things that we're going to have to work through. But instead of $300,000, we're looking closer to $570,000. Now, just a comment for you, Frank. I don't see this as money that we would want to give back, because we've never, you know, this was an expense for us. You know, we paid this out of our operating funds. So I would say that the contribution we can give back is that this is part of our diligence in reviewing this and how we spend the money. Also, I believe that I'm not terribly comfortable with a projection of 1,100, but I think it's something we should probably live with. And this is my perception, that we should live with. We're looking at a $790,000 shortfall from this year, because 188 APF short times 4,200 is $790,000. We can make that up next year by increasing the APF to 4,700 and projecting 1,100 APFs. It's $5.2 million, $5.1 million in that category, as opposed to 4.2 for this year. So I would say let's look at credit cards. Let's look at the, I would confirm your proposal for 1,100 APFs and a $4,700 APF fee. And then I also support the increase in the dues to 5%. You know, David described it very well. This is like turning a battleship around. You know, you can't do it on a dime. And we have to look forward. I've actually seen a projection that if we didn't raise dues, our FFB would be at 39% in 2 years. That's crisis. That's crisis. So at that, I now open the floor, and whoever, you know, I don't know if we go around the table again, or Mr. Director Bosak.
I don't want that promotion to a director. Sorry. We are paying today for our timidness the last 3 years. No dues increase in 2020, totally understand. Residents couldn't use the facilities. 3.5% the following year, 2.4% last year, a negotiated figure down from 5%. We just finished a year of double-digit inflation. If we were going to put a budget together that took any of that into account, most significantly the fact that our revenue projection for the end of the year is down almost $1 million, and our expenses are up $2.3 million. That's what we're facing, that kind of economics in this community. So if you were coming up with a budget and a dues increase that fit that scenario, it would be 7 or 8%. 5 to me is a compromise. I don't want to pay one more dollar than I have to, but this is not a year of me and you. This is a year of us. And it's about time for everybody to get on board and think about what the community will look like if we don't continue to fund our projects, build our capital fund so we can do that. We won't be very proud of what we see. As regard to the APFs, I'm not even sure how not the APFs, the credit card expense, I'm not even sure how that money flows. But all I know is the only thing that you have at your disposal is to possibly renegotiate the rate, and probably not possible.
It's most of those fees are baked in with the credit card companies themselves. So you can probably speak to this, Christine, but we're average 2.65%. Some of that's built in the transaction fee, but the transaction fee itself isn't that significant. So, for example, in golf, our average is 2.71. In membership, it's 2.56. So, with all the additional transactions in golf, it only equates to a very small increase in the percentage rate. And with the 20,000 transactions versus 230,000 transactions, the rate's pretty comparable. So there's not a lot of room. We're always working those rates when we renegotiate or when we sign up for contracts on with the payment providers. So there's not a lot of room there. I mean, everybody can always do better, and we always try, but it's not a significant number.
My challenge when I look at the budget that you've given us to go from 26 million in revenue this year to 28 million next year, most of that is expected to come from golf. And we're going to talk about golf, I suppose, as a separate item a little bit later.
Nope, this is it. I mean, this is the discussion.
Oh, is it really?
We have the budget packet that's laid out in front of you to discuss the actual operating budget, but there's no other presentations that I have. I was just presenting the modeling scenarios and then the changes to the actual budget since last presentation.
I'll have to consolidate my thinking. There's a lot to talk about with golf.
Yeah.
I mean, we have very few levers to pull. We pulled 2 of them, and the next one is golf. And when we're relying on golf for a $700,000 increase, I'm not sure if you're still at the 326 rounds.
Yeah, so we budgeted, so let's give some context to this conversation. We budgeted 326,000 rounds of golf for fiscal year 24. Fiscal year 23, this year, we budgeted 320. Fiscal year 22, we had 333,000 rounds, and fiscal year 21, we had 326,000 rounds. So those are the numbers on the rounds. And then as far as the revenue increases, of the 700,000, 550 is roughly 550 is attributable to outside play in the form of a prime season fee increase to get us, and that still keeps us on par with the outside public golf courses. We would be a little above, we'd be above Sun City. However, but it puts us on par with the Coyote Lakes, the Legends at Arrowhead in terms of the pricing. So that's 550 is attributable to that. 150 is attributable to a $1 increase to the members during that prime season as well.
Can I drill down a little bit on some of that? The history of our rounds here, 286, 281, 326, 333, 320. And whatever this year is projected to be. So the windfall that we got, the wind at the back of our sails, so to speak, with COVID, has become fairly lasting. But to think we don't certainly even have the availability in the key season to add a lot of players and a lot of tee times. We use about 88 to 92% of the tee times currently during that period of time. So there's not a lot of opportunity for growth, and that's when we have to make our dollars. Most people don't realize the number is as bad as it is. We use less than 30% of our tee times for the entire year. Now, that's a funny number because of what happens in the summer, but we've got a lot of opportunity with other tee times, but it's not in the prime season. So to think that we can build through additional playing during that period of time may not happen. The cards are nicely increasing, which we've seen for the last 3 years, which hasn't been our tradition. Coyote card is very, very profitable. We actually do as much volume with 24,000 less players rounds with the Coyote than we do the Kachina card. So we got to protect those people that have cards and make sure that that's where the core of our golfers are. We have about 7,800 golfers year in, year out, 75 to 7,800 over the years, but only 20% of those people play more than 50 rounds a year. So very few people are carrying golf in this community. Anything that's good or bad with them changes the directive on our golf success very, very dramatically. One of the things that I've thought about that I don't know, it links into everything we've talked about. Outside play is important, but it shouldn't be outside play. It's actually non-member play, because there's two elements to it. There's outside play and there's guest play. Outside non-members are about 1.3 million, and the guests are 1 million. So 2.4 million, that's a lot of money. If we wind up disenfranchising those people, we have a lot at risk, and the bulk of your 500,000 is coming from those increases to the outside players. I'd be cautious about that. The other thing I'd be
to the member guest and the
yes, both.
The
The
non-members.
other thing I'd be cautious about is what we just finished talking about. We've added over 3,000 new home sales the last 2 years. Let's say you use 30% of those people are golfers, which I think might be on the short side. That's another 7,800. No, that's not the number I was looking for. If they play 50 rounds a year, those people, that's 50,000 rounds. And I think we've been doing that year after year after year because we're replacing with new homeowners, people who either are not playing as much golf or they've quit playing golf and gone to other things. And the fact that we're not going to have those home sales also gives me pause when I think about adding new players to the community. So the bottom line, for me in golf, we had $1 million of additional expense in golf this year, 900,000 of it just through payroll. And yet we managed to come in at about a $600,000 loss. It wasn't very many years ago, that was a $2.5 million number. And people in the community kind of think that golf ought to pay for itself. Well, we darn near came close to doing that this year. Another year of continued round protection will maybe give us a shot at doing that. And I think it's time to maybe have the golf committee revisit the cards. You know, we haven't increased the card price for 4 years. The Kachina is still $8.95. Coyote card still $25, has been for 4 years. The pattern has been you increase that rate 1 year, you increase the daily rate the next year, kind of so you're not a double bang every year. Mm-hmm. But we've increased the rate that you pay at the pro shop, but not the card rate. Somewhere in there's a balance. Again, I don't want to pay it $1 more than I have to. I play a lot of golf, but I'm okay because whatever the community needs to keep it the way it is, I'm for that. And I'll pay whatever it takes to do that. But I think the golf committee needs to rethink some of what they've presented along the lines of the total number of rounds and the rate structures. Sorry for taking so much time.
No. What I'll say on the rounds is we're going to continue to monitor that because we're going to update projection as we go. And if we find that there's a reason to adjust those rounds, we may have to come back just simply because of that. So that's why I always kind of throw that caveat out there when we're talking about the projection. The other thing is if those rounds, and it is a higher rate, but we do have a hedge there because those rounds are during prime season. There's members here that can't get rounds during prime season. So those rounds during prime season, they wouldn't go empty. They would get filled. Now they would get filled by members or card holders at lower rates, but those rates would get filled. So there's a little bit of a hedge there, and if the public golfer says, I'm not going to golf there because of the rate. But we did look at the rate. We do look at the rates, and, especially for the conditions you receive here, we feel that proposed rate for outside play is. And then you got to be careful on the public versus member guest numbers because of how we were kind of reporting those before. Collectively, it's about 18%, but it might. I think it's going to swing a little bit now that we're focusing on that.
Revenue is 31%, rounds are 18%.
Yeah,
and but Pat's analysis of competitors puts us spot on. I mean, there's nothing in here that you should be concerned about Sun City being below us. I don't think. I hope nobody's concerned about us competing with Sun City, but we're really in great shape compared to the more expensive communities around us.
Yeah.
Mr. Miller?
You know, I saw something on CNBC, I think it was, a couple of weeks ago, and they said the demand for mortgage is the lowest it's been in 28 years. So I kind of echo what John and Frank said about concern about the 1,100 number. I mean, I've driven around with my wife and looked at houses, and there's a lot of houses for sale. Be interesting to see if they, in fact, pick up. But, you know, rather John and I think invoked the financial issues in the 2018. I'll go all the way back to the late 70s when things were so bad, inflation was high. And that was right when I was getting out of school and going to go buy my first house. And I couldn't believe the rate I was going to have to pay for a mortgage. So I am concerned about the 1,100 number. And maybe what I'm going to ask is committing heresy here. But all the facilities here belong to the rec center, belong to the community. And so we have things like the metal shop and the auto restoration club and pickleball and all this, that, and the other. None of them, as far as I understand it, pay fees when they are used to the rec center. Yet we just spent, I don't know how much, to build a new building for the metal shop because they were operating in an unsafe condition. I think it was like, what, $600,000, something like that?
It was over $1 million.
Okay. A lot of money to provide an amenity. And all those amenities in collective are what make Sun City West what it is. But it seems to me, and I play golf. I mean, that's what I do. I don't use the metal shop. I don't use the wood shop. I don't go to the auto restoration club. And it seems to me that we're investing a lot of money in those facilities as an amenity for the community, but we're not getting much in return. And I'll kind of go back to the softball guys when they came in and asked for something like $4 million for basically 300 people. Now, they didn't get that. The board decided not to move that forward. But I'm kind of back at the point where all of those people who were members of those different clubs pay a club fee to the club, okay? Could we not suggest or require that, okay, if we're going to pay your utility costs and we're going to pay to make sure you're operating safely and we're going to pay to repair your roof and we're going to do this, that, and the other, you know, could we add $1 or $2 to your membership fee for that club that actually comes to the rec center? I mean, you got two options. You've got revenue, you've got costs, you've got cost avoidance. So, you know, I look at those and I go, okay, maybe that's something we ought to have a conversation about at some point in time.
Okay. Well, we have, I think, roughly 6,000 individual club members in the community. 6,000, 12,000.
So what you're saying is it doesn't make
18,000.
enough money to count.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, it's an amenity. There's people that golf. There's people that don't golf. That's an amenity. There's people that use the pool. That's an amenity. There's people that use the library. There's people that can't participate in sports that have. So
Understand.
when
I'm just
you
looking
walk
at
up-
it from the point of view that, you know,
Yeah.
we got to look at every lever we've got.
Yes.
And what you've told me is that that lever is so small it doesn't make a difference.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's been some talk about it, and you know, that would be certainly a discussion that would bubble up through committees and up to the board.
Okay. So one other question. So when we talk about the credit card fees for membership, we're talking about exclusively people paying their member dues? What all is included in membership?
So there are some golf cards that are sold in membership as well. So it's everything that runs through membership, but it would be essentially member dues, golf cards. There'll be some other. Is Riley still here?
Okay, so when people buy tickets to go to the shows here, where is that accounted for?
That's in its own bucket. I don't remember the exact number. Actually, I have it on my presentation. Hang on one second. Yeah. And so we're proposing an increase in ticket prices to cover that this year. It's in the
Okay, so
budget.
you're going to build that in, basically, so we don't have to apply the credit card fees
Correct.
to, okay, all right.
I think that we need to kind of refocus here because I think our charge today is that we need to have a recommendation to the governing board. And for the common theme that we have talked about for the past, and this is the second meeting, is APF, whether it's APF fees or APF numbers, dues, and the entire credit card issue. And my sense is the question on credit cards is A, do we want to do that? And B, how big do we want it to be? Do we want it to be only the dues transactions, or do we want to go ahead and do credit card charges to all of our point of sale transactions? So that's one issue. The other issue is dues. You know, how big, how much? You know, 4.1 or 5%. We know what the implications of having no due increase. We know what 4.1 is, and we know what 5 is. And keeping in mind that we have an FFB that we're trying to maintain. And then the last is the APFs. You know, and I think it's almost it's not academic, but we have to have a number that we're going to live with for APFs. And I think we know the original 1,200 is not right. And probably maybe 1,012, as we're going to hit, is not right. But, you know, where we're going to be in there. So I'd like to refocus on trying to bring this together so we as a committee can send a recommendation to the governing board. Remember, this is not the finale. I mean, this is going to be revised and changed and on multiple times, but this is the framework that we're looking to recommend to the governing board. So, yes.
Just a question on that, not on, just, I'm not going to go out of order. Just a timeline, can you lay that out for us, Director Rhodes, in terms of, we keep saying we have plenty more opportunities. I don't see plenty. I see maybe 2 more times that we'll review this, right?
We have an opportunity today to come up with it. There's going to be multiple public forums. This is going to be presented at the governing board. I don't know the exact number. I heard Bill Schwinn say, was it 12? 17 additional opportunities for input. So, but from our perspective, from the Budget and Finance Committee, we have to kick this off and pass the project on to the governing board. So those are the 3 issues that I think we're dealing with right now. Now, we can come back, and I think we can come back next at the meeting on the 21st or 23rd, 21st, and we can talk about capital and I think other issues. But right now, we really need to grasp this proposed budget and to put on those are the 4 issues, or those are the issues that have been predominant every time we've talked about this. So let's deal with those, okay? And not in abstract terms. We need to deal with them in concrete terms. What are we going to do? What's our recommendation? Good idea? Bad idea? Modify? Whatever. So, yeah. So, yeah. So, what was your recommendation? Yeah.
Well, I would suggest that we kind of go around and get a feel within our committee, starting with the number of APFs, see what people suggest, and see if we can come up with some type of majority or consensus or what have you that we could recommend going forward. That's just my suggestion. But
I think it's a good starting point, you know. So, let's go ahead, let's start with APFs, okay? And I think there's two questions on APFs. One of which, I see Mr. Schwind, oh, okay. One of which is the goal, the target, and the other is the fee, okay? So let's go ahead, go back to Mr. Bosak, and if you'll start us, how do you feel about the goal and the fee?
I felt really good about 1,100 until I heard a couple of our experts talk about potential crashes. You seem to think that there's a little bit more activity going on in terms of looks, people coming to visit, making inquiries about us. It's turning around a little bit from what it was.
So the team thoughts on the APF transactions is that based, taking a look, especially 2012 forward, understanding what's happening in the housing market now versus in 2008, 2009, it was more subprime driven in terms of the housing crisis. Thinking just our perception on where we're thinking we're going to be this year. Those are all the factors in the 1,100 number. Again, we're going to continue to adjust our projection as we move through this process, and we probably got realistically 2 more months of closed financials to do that, meaning February close and March close. And if we find that 1,012 just flat out isn't in the cards and we need to adjust our budget for next year, we can do that. Keeping in mind that the impact of that is not in the operating section. Yeah, we lose out on some transfer fees and things like that, but it's down in the capital section in that APF line item number, which is a direct hit on the FFB percent. And some of the things we talked about today could hedge against that.
That being the case, I'm knowing it can be adjusted. I'm good with 1,100 and certainly good with 4,700.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
I have no problem with 4,700, but I would feel more comfortable at 1,050.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah. My auctioneering skills aren't.
Okay. Ann?
I also agree with the 4,700, but I'm gonna go with David and his 10,000 and 1,050. I think we need to bring that down a little. I'd like to be pleasantly surprised, but I'm not sure we can be, knowing the trends. And if you read the financials, it doesn't look good for mortgages going forward.
Mr. Hobald?
Excuse me. I'm in on the 4,700, but call me Dr. Doom if you wish. I'm at 900 transactions.
Nato?
I'm with John. I'm perfectly okay with the 4,700, but looking back to 2008, which was the crash, and knowing that I bought my home in 2012 for less than a song, it was the bottom of the market, and it took 4 full years to get there. So I'm thinking 900.
Mr. Novello?
It's not an auction, but it is pretty funny. I'm in on the 4,700. I think that makes sense totally. In terms of assumptions, the economist in me begs me to sort of point out for all of us, the vast majority of the people who purchase for ownership, not for investment purposes, or purchasing with cash. So the trends in the mortgage market may or may not impact as directly, just saying. However, I'm also of the opinion that we should factor this down. For our own budgeting purposes, I would be more comfortable in the 1,000 area. So it doesn't mean it has to be precisely that, but I'd like to see us bring that assumption down a little bit further to where we expect to be this year. I don't expect it to bounce back.
And what would that number be?
1,000 is my.
And for the record, I would support the 1,100 and the 4,700. Okay, let's move on. Credit card. The question that we have on credit card, do we want to charge the credit card fee? And B, how widely do we want to spread that? Do we want it only membership, or do we want it across the board? Okay? Ann?
I have one question. If we were looking at membership only, if I go put money on my card at a golf course, is that going to trigger a fee for me if you're running it through membership?
So if you added credit to your
To my
member
rec fee.
credit, if you use the credit card fee and membership, and I would say we would include that, or we don't have to include that, but
Well, I'm just saying, when you're talking about only putting it on what runs through the membership fees.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah, so that would change that number a little bit.
okay.
If we weren't going to
If
do it
I'm
for
putting
cards.
money on my card, though, say I go to Grandview and I say, I want to put $530 on my card, and then I go over here and I say, I'm going to pay my dues with my member credit. Have I just circumvented paying the 3% or whatever we put on it?
If you did it in membership based on what the way I've talked about now, no.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
just looking for
No, that's-
loopholes
No, I
because
hear you.
I
hear
know that people look for them.
Yeah.
But also, if I put that money on my card and then I go play golf, is it going to trigger a fee?
If you charge your card at membership, currently how it's structured in the current, how we currently, how I'm pulling these statistics, you would be charged, if we decided to do it in membership, anything charged in membership would include that fee.
Okay, so anything
Yes.
charged to my card.
Charged to the card in membership, yes.
Okay, so
Would
now my
inclu-
husband
would
has to
include
carry
the fee.
cash to play golf.
Yes,
But
yeah.
I just want to know where
Yes.
how far reaching this is when we say membership.
Right, and keep in mind, if you simply just charge your card with the credit card, you're not avoiding the fee because you're gonna again, the transaction is not that big. It's not as big of a portion of that 2.65% on average as you think it is. It's still going to be 2.53%.
Okay,
So to
thank you very much.
Okay, so let's go to the question on credit card. Christine, we'll start with you. The first question is, do we assess a credit card fee? And the second question is, do we limit it to membership or across the board?
Important to state that we would pass the fee along. We're not assessing anything.
You're
Right.
right. We, the community, pays the fee. What we're doing is this will be a cost avoidance.
Exactly.
For
But
us.
we are not voting to assess anything on our members. We're saying, let's pass that fee along
Yes.
for transparency.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm in full favor of passing the fee along only if it is universal for every credit card fee. So those are my two recommendations.
Okay, Mr. Bagnato?
I'm absolutely in favor of passing along the credit card fee for each and every transaction. I think that we also must include a way that people can go online and using their check process an ACH transaction to where they can not only pay their dues, but they can also add money onto their member credit account. It would be great if we could do that by logging on. So that being said, yes, I'm in favor of the credit card fee being charged across the board. But I also add the caveat that we should perhaps reduce the dues increase. We're not giving money back. We're simply reducing the dues increase by a small amount of money as a gesture of goodwill to the community.
Mr. Hobald?
Thank you. I'm in complete agreement on passing along the credit card fees for each and every transaction. We should, as a community, Sun City West, should be indifferent as to how our members pay for the services they get. And I also agree with Mr. Bagnato's comments about this would be the time to hold the line on the dues at 5:30 as a show of goodwill to the community.
Okay. So that's.
Are we commenting about
That's
the
actually,
dues now?
that's, no, not yet.
Thanks.
That's actually different than what Frank had said. Frank had wanted us to refund back. Was that right? No? No.
No, absolutely not. I'm not looking for anybody to be given a refund. What I'm simply saying is if we're going to avoid $575,000 worth of expenses by now passing along
Okay.
a credit card fee, then we should give some of that
Okay.
savings back to the
And
residents.
for a lesser due then.
Correct.
Okay.
In other words, we're looking to increase the dues 30 or 35 bucks, whatever it amounts to. Take a little bit off it. Take $6, $7 off of that. We still come out ahead, by the way.
Okay, Ms. Brown?
I would be I'm in favor of passing along the credit card charges, and it should be universal.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
I'm fine with putting the credit card charges, passing those fees on for everything. Now, Cliff just made the comment that they were adjusting the cost of like tickets to absorb the credit card fee. So I want to make sure we're not going to, if we do this, if the board ultimately decides to do that, you need to adjust those prices again.
Yeah, so it wasn't just for the credit card fee, just the processing of the tickets, just to help offset overall expenses, and that was one of the expense line items. It was $2 per ticket to help cover that. The impact of that was $60,000 to the budget. So it wasn't necessarily to fully offset the credit card fees as much as to
Okay,
help
I just want to make
absorb
sure
some of
from
that.
the
Okay.
way that was said earlier, I want to make sure the community understands that we're not double dipping.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Bosak?
I'm okay charging with alternatives, as Frank mentioned. I mean, we have to give people alternatives to what we're suggesting. And I also have to double back, I guess, on my referral to the golf committee on the cards, because my $900, $895 Kachina card just went to $927. So it needs to be considered in all of that conversation that what we're looking at. But yeah, I'm on board with it.
Okay, now we're going to talk dues. So we're going to start with you, Mr. Bosak.
5%.
Mr. Miller?
5%.
Ms. Brown?
In light of putting the credit card charges on, I'd be comfortable staying at the 4.1, which I believe is the $21 that was originally suggested.
Mr. Hobart?
I'm in agreement with Committeewoman Brown's number, the 4.1%.
Mr. Bignato?
3.5% if the credit card fees are removed, and we'll go with 4% if they are not.
Ms. Novello?
I'd be comfortable with the original proposal, 4.13% increase to $530.
Okay, let me just recap this. For APFs, it's unanimous at 4,700 is the right amount. We have Mr. Bosak at 1,100. The 1,100, 1050, 1050, 900, 900, 1,000, 1,100. So do we have someone to average that for us? Thank you.
That was 1,014 for anyone who's listening in.
Would the committee be in favor of accepting an average of 1,014? Anyone opposed to that? Thank you. We're going to use 1,014.
Dick, I have a question.
Yes.
The impact of that is going to be so are we going to go to 4,800 to help absorb that? Or are we going to stick at 47? Yes. Okay. Okay, as after, okay, good deal.
Credit card is unanimous, that yes, we want to pass the credit card transaction, and yes, for all transactions. Thank you. Credit card discussion is unanimous. Yes, we do want to pass that, we recommend that we pass that fee along to our owners, and that it will be for all transactions. Dues increase. We have 3 members that want to go to 5. We have 1, 2, 3 that want to go to 4.1, and then 1 that wants to do 3.5 or 4, depending. But in this case, it would be 3.5. Okay, so I would open the floor to how do we want to reconcile this? Because this is we're going to have a specific, we're going to have a number. Do we want to just vote on which number do we think is correct? If that's the case, yes.
Just a proposal. I think that we've had a lot of variances, and Cliff just noted as well, because of those variances, there are going to be impacts to the fully funded balance. So why don't we just allow the folks that are on the 2 opposite, if you will, the ends. Frank has one idea, and I think a couple of folks have the idea of keeping 5%. Let's just hear from each of you guys as to why that would be important to you, and then see if that changes how we feel. More of a consensus rather than I'm not comfortable with averaging the percentage increase. Let's just see if we can come. I'd like to hear a little bit more from you guys.
Let's do this. Let's have Frank, if you'll justify your 3.5, and then I'm going to ask David Miller if you would discuss your recommendation for 5. Frank, you can.
Sorry about that. I had to do a quick calculation. So the proposal that was first on the table for a dues increase was $21, best as I can remember, from 509 to 530. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So if we went with a 3.5% increase, that brings the dues to 527, provided the credit card fees were starting to be charged around the community. So I propose a 3.5% dues increase would be 527, which is an $18 increase from the original requested $21 increase. Essentially what we're doing is, by eliminating the credit card fees, we're telling the community we're going to reduce your dues by $3 less than we originally. It certainly isn't going to break the bank. And again, it's that gesture of goodwill that I believe works out fine for people. Even if we went with the 4% dues increase, we're talking about another $2 that gets added to the equation. So that's where I've come up with those numbers.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
For me, it's simply, I want more money in the bank. I don't think that times are going to smooth out anytime soon. I don't see, what we did last year when we tap danced around the rate increase. Frankly, I don't think we did a service to the community last year. And I think we need to make up some ground from what we did last year. So again, it's very simple. I want money in the bank. And I think the reasonable increase of 5%, I think in round numbers, I just think it makes sense. So simple as that.
We actually had 4 of our committee members that wanted the 4.1%, and only 1 member that wanted less than that. I think before we would vote, I would want to make sure that everyone agrees on what the low end is going to be. Okay? I'm sorry, Frank?
I do have another question or another comment, and I think it bears being out there. We're talking about percentages, but let's talk about the $575,000 in credit card fees distributed to 28,000 rec card holders, we're talking about $20 and change per rec card holder. That number has to be figured in to any dues increase.
Mr. Bosak?
What would your thought be if we weren't having the credit card conversation? Not you specifically, but anybody who thinks that 4.19 is the number. I mean, you go ahead, Frank, but
My thoughts are if we don't bother with the credit cards at all, just take it completely out of the equation, 4%, which would bring the dues to $529 a person. It's pretty close to where they wanted to be at the beginning.
yeah, I have a real difficulty trying to equate the two issues. Because we're doing one, we want to think about doing something else. 5% is such a small dollar amount in the whole scheme of things, and that's really, we can't keep asking Bill and his staff to pull rabbits out of the hat. We got to give them something to work with, and the kind of economic times that we're facing right now, I feel very, very leery about the future. That's why I wanted the 5.
I think we need to start looking at some numbers here. I think that the 4.1, but also in that budget was an assumption of 300,000. Wasn't that correct from credit
Yes.
card?
Yes.
Okay, so you've just reduced your revenues by 400 or by $300,000. I mean, excuse me, that's not true.
Yes,
Yeah,
the funding,
if we didn't
yes.
have the credit card issue.
it's an overall favorable 275.
And 1,014 times 4,700. That can't be right. Pardon? What? 442,000.
440 grand. So we'll
So-
absorb 275 would offset that, but we'd still be at a deficit on APF. And when you're talking reserve fund, not, we're
And-
talking
and-
about money in the bank.
And that's actually the issue, to Mr. Bosak's point, is that, you know, we can't continue to drift down this road of having insufficient money going into our reserve fund, where we're going to start bottoming out here very, very, very shortly. Yes, Christine?
Thank you. One of the things that we have to remember is we haven't even talked about the capital. We could find that $130,000 in capital project potentially and come to a net equivalent, right? If we went forward.
I'm going to let Cliff answer that question.
So keep in mind, so on the capital spend, most of the capital spend comes from R&R. So if it's on the R&R reserve study, it's something that I like to say, planning for the inevitable. It's eventually it gets done. So any change in the R&R spend, if you decide not to spend the money, yes, you have the money in the bank, but your fully funded balance just went up by that amount that you decided not to spend to forego. So what ends up happening is the FFB percent stays the same. And then you're just dealing with an additional amount of FFB because you got to add inflation on it. So it doesn't impact if you decide, for example, not to do $300,000 in pickleball lighting. You have the money in the bank, yes, but you've just increased your fully funded balance by that same amount because it's on the reserve study at that amount. Now, if you decided to put it on a reserve study at a different amount, then that would change the reserve study. But if you upgrade the lighting, if you change the lighting, you're going to upgrade it. So it doesn't impact when you decide if you decided not to do that $1 million paving project at RX Johnson next year. All that's going to happen is the 5.4 million is going to go down to 4.4 million, but the 54 million is going to go up to 55, and then essentially be the same. So new capital is the mover.
Exactly.
Yes.
And because we're talking about the quick calculation I just did on my phone was that we were looking at maybe 130,000, to be generous. And we have that in the new capital if we wanted to do that. I'm just pointing it out that it's not, we're closer than we think on some of these numbers. But I just to echo, even though I'm advocating doing, moving some money around, I'm very concerned about that fully funded balance. Very concerned. So it's important that we don't take any further steps away from that. So that's the reason why I think it's important to at least preserve that that revenue dues increase. I hate to say it. I mean, our community is hurting too. We're all hurting as a community to preserve our assets that we own as a community. But there are a lot of folks who, they're on a fixed income, later on in years, and they can't absorb the double-digit inflation either. So I'm trying to be sensitive to all factors, but as stewards of the community, we have to look at that fully funded balance. So anyway, whatever we do, I'm only in favor of moving this enough that we can at least hold the original projections of 49% fully funded balance. I think that's where we were projecting next year. Thanks.
Mr. Bosak.
Cliff, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's somewhere in the back of my mind. I remember you talking about the inflation costing the value of our assets to increase dramatically, which had an effect on the overall FFB percentage.
Yes.
So we went from something like $72 million in assets to $90 million in assets, and the percentage then wound up taking a hit.
So yeah, so the cost of replacement, total cost of replacement, it's
50
tracking at about
50
100 million in assets right now. There's an inflation factor applied to that, which trickles down to the fully funded balance. And currently, we historically have added 3%. We added 4% for a 5-year run to help catch us up to inflation. And then as we add these projects and they go up 300 grand, they go up 300 grand on the reserve study as well. So yes, we're real time with the market when we pay for projects, and then we have an inflation factor currently at 4% for the next 5 years to those assets.
So in the current environment, your 4% is really not near enough. And as that percentage continues to grow, our FFB percentage continues to dive.
The denominator increases.
Right.
Yes.
That's one of my concerns.
Yes.
Susan can't vote. She's not here, and she didn't dial in. So when I talked with her, and this is just informational for the committee, she was supportive of the 5%. So, but it's a recommendation, yeah. So we need to have some kind of movement on this. So, 1, 2, 3, there's.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I speak?
Yes.
Much like our political environment in this country, compromise is very, very scarce. The compromise would probably be from the low to the high around the 4.1. I heard very good arguments on both sides, and quite honestly, I'm torn. I can see both sides of the picture. They both have equal validity. If you forced me to choose, I would choose the 5. If you pushed me to the extreme. I have a slight bias in that direction for all the reasons that have been stated. I don't need to restate them. But I would like to offer up that maybe in the middle is a good place for us to make a recommendation and let the governing board, who are elected by the community, let them weigh in on this, as opposed to us tying ourselves into a knot on a recommendation.
I'm a little reluctant to pass it along, knowing full well that, we're not real sure. You know, what I'd rather do is to come to some sense of a consensus here in this meeting right here. I think I want to take another vote here. I'd like to do that again. There's 1, 2, 3. I will be the tiebreaker here, so I won't say what I would vote at, but I think we need to do this again. You know, everybody understands that, you know, why we need the money. It's not a question of do we need it. The question is how much do we need and how much is going to be palatable. So I'm going to start it again, and I'm going to ask you one more time how you're going to vote, and I'm going to start with you, Christine.
And you always start on the other end of the table normally. I know. John's very compelling. You know, if I had, I don't want to appear that I'm not conceding, but I'm going to stick with 4.13%. Which is a number. The dollar value is 530 would be the new dues.
Frank?
While 5% doesn't sound like very much money, there are communities all around the country, including our own tax district, where voters have put through initiatives to stop increasing property taxes. Any increases will be capped at 5%. And so that's a number that seems to be a trigger. It's the high point. And yet we have no high point. We might say 5% now, 6% next year. Where does it end? And so my feeling is we go back to 3.5%, which includes reducing the credit card fees to 0.
Mr. Hobalt?
Well, to me, compromise is where everybody leaves the table a little unhappy. I'm going to stick with the 4.1% as my best judgment of what is best overall, considering very good arguments. I'm truly conflicted.
Ms. Brown?
Mr. Hobold couldn't have said it better. I'm truly conflicted too, but I think I'll stick with the 4.1.
Mr. Miller?
5.
Mr. Bosack?
But we are listening to each other.
We
No,
are.
we are.
There-
We're all
there's
expressing
no
complaint.
change, so let's come into a compromise.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've gone through the diligence of this. We've argued about it, professionally argued, you know, our points. We need to come to a point. We need to come to a number. So right now I'm open for a compromise number, because that's what we're going to have. Ms. Brown?
We've thrown out a lot of things today to look at, and the effect of the credit card charges, those type of things, the APFs. I would suggest that we just tell the governing board that, you know, if we took a plurality, we had 4.1, but we also had 5, and we also had 3.5. Maybe Cliff needs to give us both scenarios and modeling for the board to look at, because ultimately the board is going to make this decision.
We actually have 3 members that voted 4.1, 1 member voted 3.5, and only 2 at 5.0.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Yep, yep. So, no, there's no tie to break. So,
Mr. Rhodes?
Yes.
since there were such compelling, if you will, points of view on both sides, is there a possibility that we could summarize, right, a couple of these key points? It seems to me, for example, that we're all in agreement, we want to preserve that fully funded balance. If can we come to that point of agreement? I don't know if that's consensus, but we want to preserve that fully funded balance. We share some concerns. We know we want to decrease some of the assumptions around APFs, but we couldn't come to a true consensus on the dues increase. We're all in favor of an increase, just different points of view. Just something like that, in other words, so that we're not kicking the can down the road. We had a great discussion here. Is there a way to summarize it?
The dues increase, Frank, what did you say at 3.5? Was it 526?
Yes, a 3.5% increase would bring you to 527.
527?
Correct.
And the high point was 535?
Right.
And the 4.1 was at 430? 530,
Right.
excuse me.
So we could run some quick well, in my head, they're quick, Cliff. I don't know. We could run some quick numbers to say, what's the impact of the fully funded balance in those three scenarios? Since we're all in agreement that we're going to pass along the credit card fees, we're all in agreement on certain things. Maybe this will help us make a decision.
So the question will then be, on a what-if scenario, what happens to the FFB?
Yeah, so I can do the math, but I'm just in my head doing it. So we're talking about 440 minus to drop the APF transfers.
That's right, that's another
Okay.
point.
275 plus. So the delta between
about
those two
125.
numbers
Yeah.
is, yeah. So if we go to the modeling, with both scenarios of credit card fees, we basically have here that additional 68 and then 142, 147, 152 would help offset that change in APF of the difference between 413 and 275 in the modeling. That's what that would be the impact. But
That
We could-
reduction brings
but
the
don't-
reserve fund balance to 26,970. And then I'll divide it by 54,033. So that would bring the budgeted FFB balance to 49.9 instead of 50.2
yes.
next year.
Yeah, and then it
declines from there.
Yes.
So I think in the interest of coming to some closure here, what we can say is that the Budget and Finance Committee is in favor of passing the credit card fees along to the owner members, and that we would recommend that it be done across the board. Okay, that's one recommendation. That we are in favor of a dues increase. We just are undecided of just exactly how much. We're between a range of 527 and 535. Okay, so and then the other issue is the projected number of APFs we're going to have is at 1,014. Okay, let me take, yes.
And raising the APF to 4,700.
4,700, thank you. Yes, thank you, raising it. So let's just go ahead and summarize, we're going to summarize that. Projection for APFs to 1,014.
Okay, got that.
Increase the APF fee to $4,700.
Okay.
Number two is the credit card fees, to pass those fees along to the members.
Okay.
It will be done across the board on all transactions. And that our recommendation is to increase the fees, but it's somewhere between 3.5 and 5.0%.
Okay.
Okay?
And I believe we had one more, these were the big things, and thank you for summarizing those. I believe we're also recommending, it's not necessarily a governing board decision, this is an operations, I think it's operations decision, but we're recommending that there be an alternative way to digitally pay for, right, so e-check. And I know that you guys are already looking at
Yeah,
what that would take.
investigating.
I
We do,
think
we
that's
do have the
fine.
Yeah,
ability to do it.
That's
It's
kind
just-
of an assumed.
Yeah.
That's part
Yes.
of their backroom deliberations. Okay, so I'm going to take a roll call vote on that. Does anyone want me to repeat that? The APFs, 2014, $4,700. Credit card fees, pass along to our the assessment to the homeowners, and it'll be done across the board. And we're in support of an increase of dues between 3.5 and 5%. Okay?
It's a nuance. It is not an assessment to our homeowners.
Thank you.
We're passing along an expense to everybody who uses,
Thank,
including our guests, including our, sorry.
It is not a small point. It is a point, and that's my fault editorially.
No,
I was wrong.
that's okay.
I accept that. Okay. A roll call vote. Christine?
I'm in favor of that.
Mr. Bignato?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Hobart?
Yes.
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Bosak?
Yes, the PR on that move has to include the magnitude, the $600,000 community expense that's at cost of avoidance,
Absolutely.
but
And the-
and the alternative method of payment. Those are really critical.
Very important.
We have completed all of the business that we can complete for today. It is 11:16. We've been here for 2 hours and 16 minutes. I think we have met our meeting tolerance level. Yes, sir, we do have a member of the audience that would like to speak, and I would honor that.
Bill Weaver, 124087. I just want to mention that Christine started to get onto this, and I did quick calculations on the impact modeling study. I think a line at the bottom should be the full fund, the total number, and you'll notice that in that 5-year period, I did some calculations. The asset value is going from 107 million to 122 million. So, and you've got to remember that if you're taking money out of this to pay for new assets, it's really $2 for every dollar spent because it becomes an asset that you have to fund later. So I think looking at the spending side, which you seem to be completely ignoring almost, at least in this particular meeting, should be looked at because owners who look at this, and if you put this on your chart, may comment that we're increasing the value of Sun City West by $15 million in that 5-year period. When dollars are tough, you're still spending.
I'm not quite sure. I'd like to talk with you after the meeting, and Cliff, if you would be
Yeah,
part of that
I understand
discussion.
what he's saying,
I need more clarity on that, okay? All right. Again, this is the first iteration of the budget. I really appreciate all of the work and the discussion that's gone into this. So you've done a very nice job today. There'll be more to follow. I know that we're going to be looking at capital, I think at the next meeting, the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Okay, anyone else from the audience that wishes to speak? Please come up to the podium and give us your name and your rec number, please.
Yeah, my name is Tim Evans, 13352. What is the transaction fee? How much?
So can I answer that? Okay. The transaction fee for credit card
Yep.
usage, if we decide to move that forward, it'd be the roughly 2.65%
Okay,
of the
so
transaction.
if I heard everything correctly, you're telling me if you did, there's no transaction fee, but you put the dues at 5% increase,
Yes.
that it doesn't change the numbers at all.
Right-
What doesn't
right-
change the
right-
As opposed to.
Okay, right now, when the community absorbs the cost
Right,
of the credit card, and the rest of the community, almost everywhere you go, like when I went to have breakfast, my bill, I had two numbers on it. One was if this is how much I paid for a credit card, this is how much I paid cash.
right.
Okay. Almost carte blanche across the board, everywhere you go.
I understand, but if
Okay.
you charge if you went to the 5%
Mhm.
and you did away with the credit cards
Mhm.
charge, are you better off?
Yes, by 500,
Yes,
by
yes,
500.
So you're better off.
correct.
Well, I can guarantee you, I mean, I play golf with 150 different guys that would go for the 5% and do away with the credit cards.
It's not either. It's both. It's both. It's not either.
What do you mean it's both?
It's the credit card transaction fee plus a dues increase.
Right, I understand, but you're talking about 4.1% to 5%. And I'm saying that difference there covers more than what you would receive in transaction fees from credit cards, correct? If I heard that.
But it isn't
No.
just to pay for the credit card fees. It's not just.
Well,
to
it's an
pay for
amount
the-
coming in.
That's correct. It's an amount
It's
coming.
amount coming in, so if you're paying, well, I forget the numbers, on the dues increases, but if you're at 5% versus 4.1, and you do away with the credit cards charges, the community's better off. Even though it's more, it's $5 a year. Correct? $7 a year? whatever.
5% is 5% of your dues. So right now, the dues are 509,
Right,
okay? So we're proposing to get somewhere between a 3.5 and a 5% increase in
right,
dues.
I understand, but
Okay,
Four,
so
let's
that's,
still just take 4% just for round numbers, 4.4% on top of that versus 5% on top of that. And you do away with the credit card charges, you're better off, correct?
you as we as homeowners are, we have right now in credit card fees, we're paying about $500,000 a year.
Okay, and that
And
extra
that's an,
$5.
and that's, and that's an expense. We won't have that expense if
Correct.
we have the homeowners pay for the credit card
Well,
fee.
you can classify it as expense or revenue.
No, it
Either
isn't.
way, it ends up being, the dollar amount is in the community's favor in the big fund,
Right.
correct?
Yes, yes,
So why in the world would you not, I mean, we're talking $5
yes.
versus the pain in the rear end for, beers are now $3.12 or $3.15 or whatever. That's just my opinion. But I
Yeah.
think there's a lot more people here that would go that route than
I-
haggling over
I think
4.1
that,
to 5%.
I think that we need to talk after this meeting because I'm not sure that I have clarity.
We can
So
meet afterwards. We'll clear it up. for
I
you.
would like to talk with you,
Sure,
okay? So,
okay, thank you.
thank you. So, do we have anyone else? Alrighty, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned. It's 11:23.